Hi everyone, welcome back to Epic English. Today we're going to be talking about digital humanities. And basically what digital humanities refers to is how our communication in the English language, and most languages in fact, is changing. Pardon my bad handwriting. So, if you know about the history of human communication, you're probably familiar with orality or oral tradition. This is basically just how everybody used to communicate, where it was by verbal stories. But then we moved away from orality. Not that we got rid of it, we just developed other systems, which led us to literacy. And literacy is the written language. So all the books we like, the newspaper, everything is written. And this is great, but we've actually moved on to another way to communicate. As many of you know, because, well, you're watching this video, you can probably see where this is going. Again, we didn't do away with those, we just moved on to another method. But still incorporating the old is electracy. And electracy is exactly what it sounds like. It is electronic communication, or referring to how we communicate electronically. And this is the digital part of digital humanities. It's not all of it by any means, but it's the majority of it. And this allows us to tell stories in a way we've never told stories before. Because before, sure, you can do a lot with oral tradition. For example, Beowulf, the Iliad, the Odyssey, they were all part of oral tradition a long time before they were actually written down, and then translated into many, many other languages. And then you have literacy, where you have the written story, and think Hunger Games. The Hunger Games was written as a story. It is part of literacy. Digital communication, or electracy, allows us to tell non-linear stories more easily. Spell that right? Don't you just love when you spell something and you don't know if you actually spelled it right? Another benefit of electracy is spell check. For as much as I love the English language, that does not look right. But anyway, nonlinear stories are stories that don't follow a timeline. So, I'm going to use The Lord of the Rings as an example because I like Tolkien. You start here, you end here. Frodo leaves, ring destroyed. Easy, simple timeline. You have event A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z, which is where the ring is destroyed. And that's great for a linear story But what about this? A nonlinear story is where you have event A, event B, event C, we're just going to abbreviate that down to EC, and event D. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go A, B, C, D, even if that's the order they happened in. Because A might actually be more connected to C, and C might be more connected to B, and then B to D. So you still have a timeline, but it's not a straight timeline. Digital Humanities allows us to do this much more easily than you ever could on in an actual book, in an actual story. I shouldn't say an actual story, it's all story. But a book on paper isn't so easy to follow if it's not linear. But in the digital world, we have hyperlinks. So I mentioned hyperlinks, where you can link the different pages together to form your nonlinear story. You have post order. So if you're writing a blog, which order you post your blog posts in, or your YouTube videos, or, anything. You also have the ability to type vaguely, or to incorporate other languages. Or are the really vague Facebook posts out of date now? I can only hope. But this vague language can paint a picture, verbally, digitally. That you may not otherwise get if you were to write in a linear way. Think poetry. Poetry is very rarely linear. And it uses a fair amount of vague language. But it paints a picture. It gives you an image. It gives you a feeling. Digital storytelling isn't so different from that. Which leads us to a new type of story format, called a My Story, not to be confused with MySpace. Now, this is all one word. And this is where you find a theme, say a theme or also a metaphor. Oh, actually you need both. My bad. So you have a theme, a metaphor, family, college, school, pop culture. You start here with the metaphor, and then you connect these three things based on that metaphor. Now, your metaphor could be paintbrushes. That's what mine was. I promise one day I will spell correctly on this thing. So once you have, and then you'll connect that paintbrush metaphor to your family, to your knowledge in school, schooling, education, to pop culture. How did these influence that to make that your metaphor, and how does that influence your view of this? Once you have that all figured out, you then go and figure out your theme, which is the connecting thread for everything. And while all of these should be connected and form a web, it really shouldn't be a linear timeline, which is something that a lot of students struggle with when they put this together, because we are so taught to tell a story, first event, second event, third event, all the way through the last event. But that's not necessarily the point of digital storytelling. It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Digital Humanities also talks about how language is changing, or actually being added to. So how we speak in text versus how we speak in a formal paper. How we speak in school with our friends. How we speak at work. It also talks about code. So this would be your HTML, Python. Probably spelled that wrong, I'm sorry. And the other 5 or 6 different code languages, and where that's fitting in now, because it is a new language. It does have its own rules. It does fit all the criteria for a language. And so now the question is, coding is becoming extremely important in today's 21st century society. Where does this fit in school curriculums today? And that's the big question that a lot of people are starting to ask. Does it fall into English? Does it fall into computer technology? Where does this fit into the curriculum? Who teaches it? And do we need a new teacher, if you will? A new department in every school to teach code, to learn code?